I'm not playing around anymore, David. I'm not playing around anymore. Here we go. Let's
Yeah,
go.
man. It's giddy up time. And I figured giddy up time is appropriate. So, we're actually considering as we continue this podcast, which I absolutely adore this podcast and I adore used to. I didn't realize by adoring you that I was gonna adore Texas and that this was now gonna be renamed the Kinetic Man podcast with blank guest from Texas. But I think that it's good. It's good.
It is good. I mean, there's a lot of good people in Texas. I'm not gonna lie.
A lot of
Some
good.
some call it the promised land.
Yeah. Texans. Those are called Texans. Those some are called Texans. All joking
Uh,
aside, man, I had a moment this morning with God. So it was supposed to snow 1 inch last night, Harp here in Colorado.
Mm.
Uh, at least at my house, it's closer to 6 inches. And so I woke up this morning. My wife is my wife's in San Diego with my daughter at a soccer tournament. So I'm just like giddy up and with the kids, with the boys, get up, let's go. I drive to the bus stop and there's nobody there. And I'm like, huh. Oh man, I bet you there's a 2 hour delay. And so I start searching through my email. There's a 2 hour delay. And so but this podcast was being threatened significantly because I had kid. I just kicked a kid out early. I'm like, dude, go to the neighbor's house. I got a podcast. And so we're making it happen today with you, Harp. I know a snow day is probably very foreign concept to you Texas boys.
Yeah, we're not. My kids don't even know what snow is. It's unbelievable.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
do your kids know about 90s hip hop? Because
Dude,
supposedly
I
in your bio on the website it says that you debate complex sophistication of 90s hip hop. So
Yeah.
let's start there. Let's go into that. Like we're gonna get into 90s hip hop.
Hey, that immediately, I'm not gonna lie.
I
When I
know that.
was just doing some research, I saw that line and I was like, oh man, this is my guy.
Come on.
We,
So
we
so
may not even
who's
be able to talk about better, man.
who's the top 90s hip hop artist
Oh, that's easy, bro.
of your day?
Tupac. Tupac.
You're a
He's the great.
you're a Tupac guy.
So I've got a picture of him praying in my office.
Nice.
And people will ask me all the time, even when I was pastoring, like at the church, I'd have a picture of him praying, and they're like, how is that allowed? Are you allowed to do that? And I'm like, yeah, I'm allowed to do that. And
I'm the
I would
pastor.
that's right. I would always say, listen, man, like you can acknowledge God's gifting on somebody, even if they don't know it's from God. Right.
Mm,
I mean, Beethoven wasn't a believer, but everybody says he's a genius. Tupac was a genius. I mean,
mm.
Cat was ahead of his time. I think he was a modern day prophet. Matter of fact, I think he was a better prophet than half these television preachers, to be honest with you. And he was just incredible, man. And so yeah, he's number one for me. Um, I'm a big Eminem guy.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
I don't think
Yep. That was
Eminem gets
good.
enough respect, man. He would probably be number two for me. And the list could go on. We could literally do it
Dre
forever.
or Snoop Dogg? Dre or
Oh
Snoop
man,
Dogg?
they're kind of hand in hand. I love them both. Those are kind of my top two, man.
Dre was a killer, bro.
Yeah.
Anytime I hear the word regulators, my
Warren G? I don't
Little
know.
Warren G action. Little
my
Warren
mind
G.
just goes back, bro.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Well, and I
Well,
think there's also, my heart has become. It's interesting because I think and I think this is a great place to jump into Betterman. I think the idea, especially in the church, but just with just I think where we're at in society, it's almost like you have to be perfect, man, or don't even try. And we lose the idea of being better. We lose the idea that we're all valuable. We lose the idea that I think all of us would be reticent to let somebody in a public domain, to let somebody into our browsing history and our emails and our conversations and our thoughts and our actions. And we're so hard on on folks. And I think, I want to get into some of the things you talk about in Better Man. But first, before we go there, hey, Harp, tell us about you. Tell us about what you do. And then let's dive into this conversation about Better Man, because I'm excited about the conversation and the empowerment
Mm.
of men, and the clearing of the clouds and the clearing of the confusion of what it means to be a man. I'm excited about that conversation, but tell us about you first.
Yeah, man. So I've been running hard after King Jesus for about 16, 17 years now. Um, got saved shortly after grad school, man, was kind of hopeless, looking for where hope come from. I had a buddy from grad school say, come to church with me. I said, I'm not interested in that. He said, there's free Chick-fil-A and college girls. I said, I'm in, bro.
Oh,
I
man.
came early. And man, through that process was saved, born again, was discipled. I've never not known discipleship. So from the moment I was saved until today, there are 3 or 4 older men in my life that have trained me, shaped me, equipped me. The first man was a 70-year-old retired pipe fitter with a 6th grade education. This dude was a killer, bro. He was unbelievable. He introduced me to his granddaughter, whom I married. So I found a mentor and a wife.
That's awesome.
So we've been married for going on 16 years. We have 4 kids, all under the age of 13. So I haven't slept in about 5 years. But yeah, I live out here in
And I think
Texas.
you got about 5 more years that you could sleep. You could sleep in about 10 years. I think you're good.
That's right. That's right, man. And then I met Robert Lewis, dude that authored Men's Fraternity and How to Raise a Modern Day Knight. I met him 3 years ago, and he was like, "Hey, come do this. Basically, come do this better, man." And man, it's been my life's work, been my passion. I've been running hard after men for about 10 years, and then I've been doing it in the better man context for about 3 years now, and just love every minute of it.
Harp, could you just give like a brief description of like what Betterman is
Mhm.
in like the 30,000 foot view?
Yeah, better man is the on ramp to God's design for manhood and masculinity. I often tell people what we're not. We're not deep discipleship. And I'm a discipleship guy, right? Like studied it, lived it. I'm a discipleship guy. Better man's not deep discipleship. We're the beginning. We have a core conviction: you can't become what you can't define. So Better Man offers a definition of what it means to be God's man in the 21st century. And one of the things I teach is when a thing isn't rightly understood, when a thing isn't rightly defined, the abuse of that thing is inevitable. So, for example, when the church isn't rightly understood, the abuse of or by the church is inevitable. When marriage is not rightly understood, we can go down the list. Well, manhood has been abused for the last 2, 3, 4, 5 decades. People abusing it one way or another because we haven't rightly defined it. So, Better Man, over 31 weeks, offers the church a very biblical, theological, practical definition of what it means to be God's man today. And most churches, we're in a little over 5,000 churches, 85 different countries right now. Most churches don't have a functioning men's ministry. As a matter of fact, only 7% of churches in the West have a functioning men's ministry. And usually that means you have a quarterly breakfast where an ex-NFL kicker comes and talks about faith and football, right? Like that's the extent of it. So we come in and we offer a 2-year turnkey solution that you can run your men through and give them a foundation of what it means to be God's man.
That's awesome, dude. And I didn't realize the numbers were that, in a place that I would hope would be leading the way. But it makes sense because I don't think men are leading the way in the church anyhow. So it's unfortunate. You have all these powerful prayer warriors, and you have these people stepping up. And typically when you look around, it's women. And that's not to disparage women at all. I thank God, by the grace of God, they're stepping up. But a lot of dudes just, man, we miss out. We miss out on the blessing. And on your website, you talk about there's these 3 values that you highlight: clarity, community, and transformation. And under transformation, you specify when men are better, everything changes. Can you tell me what that means?
Yeah, so that's actually less biblical and more cultural, sociological. Even secular scientists, secular psychologists, like have proved that when men are doing what men were designed to do, they're the high tide that raises all ships. Fatherlessness disappears. societal ills that politicians are already always talking about, right? Abortion. 9 out of 10 women who have an abortion say that if the man was present and doing what he was supposed to be doing, they wouldn't even consider an abortion. Like it's on the men. And we could go through every list. Incarceration rates directly tied to fatherlessness, right? Illiteracy rates directly tied to the amount of time. Florida State recently produced a study. It's a phenomenal longitudinal study, 20-year study, where they looked at how does a child become a healthy young adult? And they looked at all these things: emotional, physical, psychological health. The number one correlation was how many meals they had around the dinner table with their dad. The more meals around the dinner table growing up correlated to that you were actually going to be a healthier young adult, right?
Wow.
So when men are stepping into their God-given design, everything gets better. Marriages are stronger. Children thrive. Churches, grow in power and prominence, which, we're not the only ones that know that. Secular scientists aren't the only one that knows that. Satan knows that, which is why men have had a target from the beginning of time. You destroy manhood, you destroy masculinity, you destroy the home. And if you destroy the home, you cripple a civilization. And it's exactly what we're seeing happening today.
So what does let's get to the definition a little bit. You're all about definitions. What is biblical masculinity? What does that even mean? I know you have a long study on it,
Yeah.
but kind of for this shorter time block, what does biblical masculinity even look like?
Hey, bro, I'm old school Baptist. We alliterate everything.
All right, let's do it.
So I got the 4 W's. So super sweet, super simple, and we keep it simple for men. Men just need to be shown how to win, right? I just read a
David
study.
needs real simple. Like this is good for him.
Yeah, I
And
just
Stu just needs to be shown how to win. So let's do this.
so 4 W's. A real man courageously follows God's word. So he takes the Bible and he obeys it. Um, Secondly, a real man loves, he serves, he protects God's woman, right? If I'm laying in bed with my girl and I hear somebody kicking the front door, I don't nudge her and say, "Babe, go check that out." Like, no, I'm from Texas. I grab a shotgun, I go look, see who's coming in my front door. Like that's what we do. But it's
You
not
don't
just,
send your wife to do that?
that's
Do
right.
that for you?
That's right.
Oh,
That's right.
all right. Stu, start taking notes, dude.
I got my pen.
Yeah, but and it's not just physical protection; it's emotional protection, it's mental protection. Here's the reality, brothers. More times than not, the person I have to protect my wife from is me, and my indifference, and my passivity,
Mm,
and my lack of gentleness. Right. So we
yeah.
teach all that. Third is a real man excels at God's work. So whatever he puts his hand to, man, he wants to be the best at it, and it's probably it was my least favorite section to write. But now that it's done, it's probably my most favorite study because we tear down the sacred secular divide. And man, just a quick story. I had an HVAC guy come to my house last summer. My air conditioner went out, and I went outside the meeting. And as I'm coming around my house, he pops up from behind the HVAC and he says, "Whoa," he says, "Bro, you're the Betterman guy." He said, "My church watches your videos." And I'm like, "Man, that's great. Let's get this AC going, bro. It's 130
Yeah,
degrees." And
that's like a major emergency in Texas.
yeah, yeah. So I'm working on it with him, and he's done, and I'm packing up his tools. And he says, "Man, I'm a Christian." He says, "I wish I could be more like you." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, man, you write these curriculums and you go speak at these churches, and man, I just want to be more effective for the kingdom." I said, "Well, how many years have you been an HVAC guy?" He said, 20 years. I said, "How many homes have you been in?" He said, 25,000 homes probably. I said, "Bro, you have more influence than any mega church pastor I've ever met. Are you kidding me? Taking Jesus into 25,000 homes, showing up with excellence, being on time." I said, "How many guys you have working for you?" He's like, "I got a team of 3 or 4 apprentices." I said, "Man, you're discipling those guys." I said, "You're doing more than most Christians I've ever met." Like, and I'm not exaggerating. He starts to cry in my driveway. And he said, "I've never thought about it like that." I'm like, "Bro, today we start thinking about it like that."
That's
So
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 good.
a real man excels at his
That's awesome,
work.
man.
Like whatever he's putting his hands. I don't care if you're a surgeon. I don't care if you're a street sweeper. I don't care if you pastor a mega church, man, you're doing it to the glory of God. And then lastly, so it's word, woman, work, and then lastly, a real man betters his world. And he does that through three avenues. He does it through his children, he does it through his church, and he does it through his community. And basically, you're just going to leave the place better than you found it. And what we've discovered by painting that small target for men, bro, they'll play the game. If men don't know how to win, they won't play. They'll just sit on the sidelines. But if you show them like a scorecard, if you give them a cheat code, bro, they'll play all day. And and man, we've probably had, gosh, that we know of, we probably had 500,000 guys go through it in the last 2 years. I mean, they're stepping up and playing the game because finally somebody said, "Hey, this is what it means to be a man." Super simple, right? And there's nuance and context, and you can go deeper in that. Manhood's like the gospel; you never outgrow it. Like loving God's woman as a newly married man, and then loving God's woman in a 50-year marriage. I mean, that's going to look different, right? And you're going to grow in wisdom and understanding. But if you have those principles, if you have that clarity, man, you can step into your call, which is what we're about.
Dude, that's awesome. And I, it's interesting you highlight. So recently, I'd probably say in the last 2 months, the work thing has really been something that like has been transformative. There was there was a series that happened in church. There were some decisions Stu and I made. There's different things that really elevated work to a place of worship. And not that I worship work, that work is an expression of worship, that God in the marketplace is, and you hit it on the head. The idea of how many people are actually touched by businesses versus the church. And I think it was Billy Graham had talked about that the next great revival was going to happen in the marketplace. Like that was going to be the grounds for just an explosive growth of God. And so you mentioning that is incredible. And I think those four W's that wrote them down, star them and wrote, "This is where men win." But I think you nail something. And it reminds me the other day, skiing with my kids, and I took them up and man, they're pushing hard. Like they're pushing hard, dude. They're starting to fly. And my youngest guy's 8. My middle dude is 11. That's the dude I'm concerned about most right now. And then my daughter is 13, but they're pushing hard. And my wife said, we stopped and we're just looking down on our kids going down the slope and just flying. And she's like, "Man, I think this year's the year that I am going to be the slowest one in the family." My wife says that. But what hit me is not only the joy in that moment, the simplicity of what it is, but those kids really, it's my role to push them to the next level, right? On something as simple as the mountain. Like they're trying to keep up with dad now. And by keeping up with dad, they're just, it's not that mom can't, but mom's just not as, I've just got way more experience on the mountains than mom. But they're excelling at a level that they would never excel at because the dad's present. And that's just one tiny little snippet of an influence that we can bring. And it's not that my wife isn't instrumental in that. And it's not that she's not a huge part of that. And it's not that those kids exist without her.
Right.
It's just a different role. Right. And it's just an incredible way that if we embrace the intentionality of being a man and the simplicity of influence, it's hard, but it's simple. Then man, we can, like you said, we can move mountains, or we can change the world around us.
Absolutely. Well, again, it's the high tide that raises all ships. You know, I mean, we meet with churches all the time. And here's the reality. Most of the churches we meet with, they have a booming kids ministry. They have a selling women's ministry, right? And they have a dead men's ministry. And we wonder why we're not experiencing revival. Well, revival is not going to come through your pirate ship in your atrium that the kids are climbing all over. Like revival is not coming through children's ministry. Doesn't mean children's ministry is not important. My church has a tremendous children's ministry, man. I love it. It's the same thing with women's ministry. Revival is going to come, and it's I don't want to get all biblical, but at the end of Malachi, the Old Testament ends with God saying, "There's going to be a curse on the land if fathers turn their hearts from their children, and if you want renewal on the land, all you have to do is turn the hearts of fathers back to their children." And we are living we're living in two times. We're living in a Malachi 4 type setting where really there's this error that's been created by distance. And then two, we live in what I call a Judges 2 time because we've killed multi-generational discipleship. There was this big shift in the 80s in church history. In the 1980s, we went from academic spaces to communal spaces. Think Sunday school to small group gatherings. Not bad. Small groups are great, but for every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. And when we made that shift, we aged and staged everybody. So we put the non-marrieds over here, we put the marrieds over here, and we told the non-marrieds, this is what you need to aspire to, right? We put the 20-year-olds in one corner and we put the 70-year-olds in the other corner. And we thought by putting a bunch of 20-year-olds together, wisdom would just bloom. Bro, it's not like that's not how wisdom works. That's not how
Stupidity blooms in that group, man.
Blind leading
Especially
the
you put a
blind.
group of 20-something men together, man. It's just gonna be dumb, dumb,
bro.
dumb.
I used to tell people when you got one guy in a locker room, you got one brain. When you got two guys in a locker room, you got half a brain. Like it just starts to deduce after that, right? So when we aged and staged everybody, we killed multi-generational discipleship. There's no 60 and 70 and 50-year-olds talking down to the 20, 30, and 40-year-olds, man. And this wisdom transfer, this transfer of tradition, man, it's dead. And somehow we've got to revive that. We've got to bring that back. And shame on both parties, right? Shame on the young guys for not asking for help. And shame on the old guys for sitting on the sidelines and acting like, it's time to retire and coast. No, man, we have a whole generation of young men that are saying, man, if you show me the way, I'll follow it. Which, by the way, it's why Jordan Peterson has 10 million followers. It's why Joe Rogan has 20 million. It's why Andrew Tate has 30 million followers. Like these guys have put their hand up and say, hey, I know a way. And people are running towards them, right? Right, wrong, or indifferent. And at some point, the church has got to wake up and say, hey, we know the way. And put their hand up and say, follow us. And that's what we're trying to bring about.
So do you think that so on your website you say 2 generations ago men were confident in their manhood, 1 generation ago men began to compromise their manhood, and today they're confused about their manhood. Is that what that comes from, do you think? Or is there something else that's causing that?
No, it's exactly what it comes from. The biggest men's movement in recent history happened in the mid '90s. Promise Keepers, right? And you had Pat Morley, Man in the Mirror. You had Robert with Men's Fraternity. You had Steve Farrar, Point Man. You had the Million Man March on Washington, and the enemy was reject passivity. That's what everybody was talking about. Men have to reject passivity, reject passivity. Well, fast forward 30 years, 35 years, the enemy's not passivity anymore. The enemy is ignorance. It's not good men, bad men. Let's make all the bad men good men. It's good men and men who want to be good. They don't know how. They never had anybody show them, right? I want you guys to think about this. In 1960, 4% of all children grew up without a father. Today, it's 41%.
Yeah, that blows my mind.
41% of the young people in this country are growing up without a father in the home. That doesn't include men like me, and I'm what I've coined a half orphan. I grew up with a dad in the home, but he spent the majority of his time in the garage drinking beer, emotionally, physically, spiritually detached. So I might as well been orphaned, right? And then that doesn't include those who grow up in the church that never had a spiritual father, because we've never put an emphasis on discipleship like we should have. So you've got the actual orphans, you've got the half orphaned, and you've got the spiritually orphaned. So you had one, and I now think it's 2 generations that have grown up without a guide, without anybody to show them the way. So when men don't have a guide, they do one of 3 things. They either guess at their manhood, which 9 out of 10 times you guess wrong and break a lot of stuff behind you. They assimilate to the loudest voice in culture, That's the second thing they'll do. So whatever's most popular, whatever's most, whatever's going to get me to where I think I want to go, I'm going to follow that guy. Or three, what we're seeing today is they'll just slow quit their masculinity. And they'll just resign. For the first time in the history of histories, you know, 25 to 45-year-old men just surpassed 60-year-olds and above for suicide. It's the first time that's ever happened. Men make up 51% of the population in America. We account for 81% of the suicides. And nobody's talking about this. We are literally killing ourselves out of despair and hopelessness. And when that stat came out 6 months ago, one news outlet picked it up. The USA Today was the only news outlet that picked it up. And somebody wrote to me, and because I hadn't made that comment, I said, there is literally an epidemic of suicides going on and nobody's talking about it. If that was any other subgroup, if that was 12-year-old Native American girls, there would have been a move in Congress. Like Congress would have passed laws. But here's what I believe. I believe because it's middle-aged men, I think there's this underlying current in society that says men are getting exactly what they deserve. And so nobody's talking about it. This is real.
Yeah.
That's crazy, man. And, it's interesting too, because, I'm just reflecting on, I feel like there's two sides of a perspective of manhood, meaning there's what we see on TV and you see this emasculation and you see it being really hard for dudes to be dudes because, and I'm not saying anything about like the Me Too movement or any of that, like that was good or bad. I'm just saying that you see all these, because of these different things, you see men in very public realms just being crushed. But I look at my own life and it is I would say it's relatively easy and not super challenged, my manhood. Like when I go outside and I play with the kids, I coach football. My daughter told me the other day, she's like, all my friends are intimidated by you. And I'm like, good. Like there should be a level of respect, but she also said, but they all they know that you're the fun dad too. It's like a dichotomy. And I said, well, that's all that really is just a recognition of my love for these boys and the football team, but also like their level of respect, a mutual respect between them and me. And it manifests differently. My whole point to this is I feel like so many men, if they just heard the normalcy of life, that you can step up and be a man and just a normal, like not in your YouTube or your, your influencer world of that we observe, but just in your day-to-day interactions in your home, it's a joy and it's not toxic. It's not, there's no disparaging of me being a man in my home. And I think if more of us just heard that message, we could embrace it and really move forward. Like maybe just turn off your TV and your cell phone and seek a mentor or discipleship and understand that the execution of manhood on a day-to-day basis really isn't it's really not that hard. Right. Like it's not, I'm not going to get in trouble. The neighbor ladies aren't going to be like, David loves football and dudes hitting each other and violence on the field. And my kids are part of that. Like, that's not what it is. They're like, oh, these guys are investing in my kids. They love them and they're playing a game that everybody enjoys. And there's lessons in that. Right. Like the dichotomy is so interesting to me. And we're paralyzed of fear that I think Satan is putting this fear that isn't even, we can reject it so easily.
Yeah, David, that's such a good word, bro, because what you're picking up on is a shift we're seeing. We are coming out of the Me Too movement. We're coming out of third wave feminism. So even one of the leading feminists in America today is on record by saying, maybe I took this stuff too far. Men do serve a purpose, right? So where we see that kind of feministic Me Too culture easing up on men, there's a danger coming from this side of this kind of red pill hyper masculinity that's saying, you're not a man, if you don't smoke cigars, if you're not, sleeping with three chicks, if you're not a black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, like you're not a man. And so we have a whole generation, especially of young men, that are kind of running after that red pill masculinity, which to your point, David, is empty, and it will lead you astray when really the answer is, and I've been using this phrase lately because it's something the Lord's been doing in me. Man, He is giving me permission to be ordinary, right? And dude, I really am a pretty ordinary dude. Like I've got toddlers. I've spent 2 days looking for my toothbrush because my 4-year-old hit it. Like I've been so frustrated for the last day and a half.
Hey
My
man, I
wife,
just buy a new one, dude. Come on,
I
man.
know.
Just buy a new one.
Then it was one of those nice ones too, bro. Like the electric man, and
Yeah, but you don't know where that's been. Do you have a
I,
dog?
no, no,
Your
but
kid's
you're right.
probably using that to clean parts of the dog that you don't want, dude. You don't want
I,
any of that.
I know, bro,
Go
but
buy a
like
new one.
that's right. So what the Lord told me was, man, I'm a fairly ordinary dude. My life isn't glamorous by no means, but it doesn't mean it's not abundant. And bro, I've just been sitting in this understanding that, man, being a father to my 4 kids, being present, playing with Nerf guns, building Legos, right? Getting up early and starting the coffee maker for my wife so she doesn't have to, bro. Like, not only is that stuff sexy, bro, but that stuff is courageous and that stuff is manly. And it's there's abundance in the ordinary. And I think the hyper male red pill is telling us you have to be extraordinary. I think the church feeds this culture. I mean, I just had a conversation with my pastor, and I said, bro, if we bring up one more person who sold their business and went and built an orphanage in Africa, I'm going to bang my head against the wall. Like, is that what it means to be a good Christian? Is you have to sell everything and go build orphanages? Because if so, bro, I'm not called to that. Like, I guess I'm less than. Like we have to start celebrating the ordinary, because I think Eugene Peterson was right. He equated the ordinary everyday to faithfulness. And man, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for faithful dudes, bro. Um, Give me the guy that's been married for 40 years, right? Ups and downs in the marriage, but he stuck with it. Give me the guy that's been working the GM plant for 42 years, bro, putting parts on a car so that he could feed his kids and keep them in school, right? Man, give me that faithful guy. Give me the 60-year-old in the parking lot, man, at the church who's still active and serving his church and loving his church, man. I don't, and because I'm prone to chase the extraordinary. I'm prone to chase that. But what I'm learning is that faithfulness, that ordinary faithfulness is really what God's after.
Well, dude, and sorry, so I know you got a great question, but it's interesting. I've had this conversation more now, and I just had it yesterday with a guy who's seeking, what he wants to do next, and there's confusion, and there's about we were walking through the confusion together on both sides, but the idea of the power of ordinary is such a fascinating conversation that has been more prevalent. And I'll tell you, dude, it was, when you look at, it's almost ordinary now to grow up in a fatherless home. 9 more percentage points. Well, I guess to put it over 51%. So you said we're at 41%. So 10 more percentage points. And it will become the norm, at least the majority, that kids grow up in a fatherless home. So when you look at what's extraordinary, the normal and the ordinary is actually extraordinary. Staying married is now extraordinary because
Sure,
it's the
man.
exception, dude. It's the minority. And I think we really need to lean into that. Dude, I was making my kid came home, and normally I say no, but yesterday I just was convicted to say yes. And he's like, Dad, let's make oobleck. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. He's like, dude, it's corn starch and water and food coloring. And we did it. And dude, it was a beautiful moment for me and my son. Me and my boy were just by ourselves, messing around in this bowl of slimy stuff. And we did it for like an hour. And my kid was just he's smiling. He was happy. He just wanted to be with his dad. And there's nothing extraordinary about that, but it was so impactful.
It's powerful. It's powerful. And as men, we're prone to intensity versus consistency. So what I'll do is I'll work 70 hours a week for 4 months, and then I think I can make up for that missed time by taking my kids to Disneyland for 3 days. When really all my kids wanted was me to play with them 10, 15 minutes a day. Right. And we don't just do this in fatherhood, we do it in marriage, we do it spiritually. We'll neglect reading the Bible for 3 months, and then we'll go on a 20-day fast. And somehow we think that brings us closer to God. Really, more times than not, it drives us further away, when all God really wanted us was us to spend 5, 7 minutes a day with him. So I really try to encourage men, and I do it in my own life. Man, consistency is greater than intensity, because we love intensity. But again, when you look at these biblical characters, when you look at great men of God throughout history, bro, they were not marked by building great empires. They were marked by just consistent, right? The Bible says, "Blessed are the steps of the righteous man," not the leaps and bounds, the steps of the righteous man. It's just one step in front of the other. It's that ordinary faithfulness that, to your point, David, and I love that, it's now becoming extraordinary because it's not the norm. But I always encourage men, if you have to choose between intensity and consistency, always choose consistency.
I was just listening to the Betterman podcast on my way into my office today, driving here, and I just was listening to the most recent one that came up, and it's actually, I think, a replay from like 2019 of one of it says what kids need from their dad, and some of the stuff that they're talking about is exactly what we're talking about here, is just consistency, doing the small things over and over and over again, and the host, I'm blanking on his name, but he was like, yeah, one of the things that I remember most about my dad was he was always up before me, and he was always kind of finishing up his morning Bible study in the Word. He had the Bible open on the table when he was just finishing up. He was like, I don't ever remember a day when I beat him up, waking up in the morning. He was always up early, consistently in the Word. We always went on a family trip every year. I remember those, going to a football game or something, like having an experience. And there's some really good words in that podcast episode. But so my question is for the ones that don't have the dad, for the men, like you, that maybe even had it, and similar to me. My parents divorced when I was 5. My dad moved away. I was in a single mom household until I was 12. My mom remarried, but he was an older gentleman. He had already had kids. He wasn't like emotionally there. Um, you don't have this spiritual father. You don't have an elderly gentleman in your life to pour into you. How do we, as 40-year-old men who didn't get that, go and find that? Like, how do we, especially when it's not in the church, right? There's not a men's, group of disciples like looking out for you, trying to pull you out and be like, hey, come follow me, right? Like, how do we go find that? How do we get that? Because I honestly, I don't have it. I don't have an elderly man in my life, 65, 7-year-old man that can pour into me. And and I yearn for it. Like, how do I get that?
Yeah, such a good question, Stu, bro. And let me clarify that age is relative. So if you're
Fair. Yeah.
14, 24 is old.
Yeah.
And if you're 24, 42 is old, right? And if you're 70, you're just old. You got everybody covered. So you can check all the boxes. But dude, I love the question. And so one would hope, and I hope people listening to this don't hear, oh man, there's Chris Harper again just bashing on the church. I'm a churchman. Like, I believe the local church is the vehicle God's going to use to redeem the world. So I'm not critical of the church, but I'm not afraid to think critically about the church. And that's really where I'm coming from. That's my heart. So my hope is, there are still men in the local church today. We make up about 38% of the local church, but we're still there. So my hope is those younger men that are looking for discipleship, they can find that in their local church. And I've told men before, if you go up to men in your church and say, hey, I would love for you to teach me, show me how to love my wife better, show me how to excel at my work, show me how to be the man God's created me to be, and you get no after no after no, then go find a new church.
Yeah.
You know, a great place to start would be with your pastor. And maybe your pastor doesn't have the time. Maybe he's doing it with 3 or 4 other people. You know, unfortunately, what I'm learning is a lot of pastors aren't discipling because they themselves has never been discipled, right? But a great place to start would be with your pastor and say, hey, do you have any recommendations of some guys I could tap into? Um, you know, outside of that, if you can't find anything in the church, and that would absolutely break my heart, you know, I would look to guys in the marketplace or in my community that seem to be where I want to be. And then it could start with a simple question like, how did you get here? Like, bro, I've noticed how you speak to your wife, and I notice how you treat her. Like, where did that come from? And would you be willing to show me? Could we meet once a week or once a month? Right. And here's the key, back to David's point. Don't look for the extraordinary, right? I don't like, you don't have to be a multimillionaire running a big corporation to mentor me or to disciple me. Matter of fact, like, look for the weird guy that still wears socks with his sandals, man. Find that guy, right? Like
That's
that's
David.
like he's been married for 50 years, you know, he's still opening the door for his bride. Like when you see that, man, zero in on that guy and say, hey, I want some of that. Would you be willing to share it with me? And you know, I would really, really hesitate looking online, like especially influencers, Christian celebrities, things of that nature. I mean, that would be the last place I would go looking for it. I would start with my church and then I would look into the marketplace and community I'm in more times than not. And here's the deal. I'm proactive. So if I've actively discipled 30 people in the last 10 years, if I've asked 30 people, hey man, would you like to walk alongside of me and learn what it means to be a man? I've never been told no. Now, I've had guys start and not finish. I've had guys flake out. You know, I've had guys not show up, but I've never been told no. So sometimes with us older men, I think there's a fear that the younger guys are going to reject us or they're going to see us as weird. And honestly, we need to be a little more weird, be weird, right? But if I've asked a young man, hey, do you want to go on a journey with me? Dude, I've never been told no. And my hope is if young men are asking older men, man, I'd love to walk alongside of you. My hope is they're not hearing no. And if they are, man, shame on us. Any dude that has any wisdom and any experience in listening to this show right now, man, if you're telling people no, if you're not willing to expend yourself on behalf of others, shame on you. And you're not doing what Christ has called us to do.
David,
Yeah, that's a good
before your
word.
question, it just, man, this conversation inspires me to do two things. One, go seek out someone to disciple me and be the one that just goes and asks, right? And two, offer that same thing to younger men, to be that light, to have and invite them to walk alongside me as I'm learning, right? And as I'm growing. Both of those are two action steps that I could take immediately. So
Yeah.
I love this conversation, man.
Stu, man, I was teaching at a church about a year ago, and I got done, and this 32-year-old cat came up to me, you know, got a young son, been married 2 3 years. He's like, hey man, you know, I've never had anybody disciple me. Courageous, bro. I could, his voice was shaking a little bit. He's like, would you be interested? Like, could I follow you for a while? I'm gonna be honest, like I was maxed, I was tapped, and I didn't tell him no, but I did say, hey man, let me pray about it. But I also got some guys in my circle that are looking to disciple. Let me see if I connect you with somebody, right? I wasn't gonna leave him hanging. And on the drive home, man, the Holy Spirit was just beating on me. And like it was like, Hart, this kid came to you. Like call him tonight and say you'll have coffee with him tomorrow. So I did, man. I listened to the Spirit, and I even apologized to him. I said, hey man, I hesitated when you asked me that. It probably took a lot of courage for you to do that. So if I made you feel any kind of way, any insecurity, I just want you to know I'm sorry. I should have responded more promptly. And I told him that. Bro, a year later, it is one of the sweetest friendships I've ever had in my life, bro. This
That's
dude is
awesome.
this dude's a rock star, man. And he's taught me as much as I've taught him. And it's all because, man, I was open to the prompting of the Spirit, man. And again, I was doing what God has called and designed me to do. So if that story encourages anybody, man, just say yes and see what God does with it.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I love that. I've got a dude in mind right now, lives on our street, and super sweet kid, freaking Texas kid. I say kid, he's an adult man,
Right.
but he's invested in my middle son. He comes to all the football games. It's really interesting. He's a single guy, young guy, comes to all the football games. And I told him, I'm like, hey man, my expectation for you here soon is that you're coaching with me. You're coaching these boys with me because they want to see somebody like you, that like you're closer to age than they are. You bring a different energy. And he's like, man, and he's really thinking about it. Right. But I want to take that to the next level and be like, hey, dude, you're investing in my kid. I want to invest in you.
Come
I want
on.
to, and if you choose, it's just an open invite. But what's interesting is the level of hunger, and I think we need to recognize that it's not extraordinary, right? We say that again, it's not extraordinary. It's just there's somebody in your life, and just the words of, hey, you can accept or deny, decline. This doesn't hurt my feelings. I just want you to know you're special, and the invite is open if you'd like to walk this journey.
Right.
That could change a life, man. That could change a life.
100%. I'm gonna tell you, it'll change more lives than any nonprofit. No, I shouldn't say it. It'll change more lives than most nonprofits and ministries out there. It really
Yeah.
will. We've complicated this whole thing. We have got to get back to simplicity, clarity, community, everything Betterman talks about. We got to get back to the basics. And it's just, and it's not even saying, man, you don't have to have a PhD in theology. You don't have to be perfect. As a matter of fact, all you've got to be willing to say is, listen, man, I've screwed up 4 times. Maybe by following me, you only screw up 3 times. And that right there is enough. Like if you could help somebody trip up just a little less than you, well, you're changing somebody's life.
Yeah, and to the question, what help demystify this whole discipling others thing, right? I think a lot of people are like, man, that sounds great. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to. Yeah, so you invite them to coffee, and then what? Like, what
Yeah.
does
Do
that
I need a
even?
curriculum? Do I
Do
need
I need a
a
curriculum? Like,
guide?
how do I do this thing? Because I'm just overwhelmed. How do I ask somebody to do it?
Yeah.
I'm curious. Can you demystify this for us and just tell us what it looks like?
Absolutely. So it's five simple steps. Starts with an invite. It has to come through an invitation, right? And whether it's one-on-one, whether it's 2-on-1, 3-on-1, 1-on-4, like I don't debate all those things. It works in different contexts. I get it, but it starts with an invite. Hey, I'm going to go on this journey. Come with me, right? You're going to learn what it means to be XYZ. That's the second step. You got to define the relationship. Again, without clarity, there's only confusion. So this is where Betterman would be helpful, right? We're going to give you the 4 W's. We're going to walk through these 31 weeks together. And Betterman is not the end all be all. Kingdom Man, what Tony Evans did is great. I mean, I could list 10 manhood curriculums right now that you could use, or you can just go through the book of the study a book of the Bible together, right? But you're going to define the relationship. Hey, this is what we're going to do. Third, and this is a big step, it's a call to put to death childhood thinking and acting. So just like the young man you're talking to, David, hey, I want you to come coach with me, but more than that, I'm going to invest in you. And here's what we're going to do, man. We're going to think, we're going to talk, we're going to act like men. I'm going to show you what that means, right? We're going to put to death childhood thinking. Fourth is you're going to create a space, an environment for them to succeed in. Now, whether that's them coming over your house once a week for dinner, whether that's them sitting down with you and your bride, whatever it is, you're going to create a safe space for you to train them, for you to rebuke them, for you to correct them, a safe space that they can fall but fall forward. But you're going to create an environment where those principles and those lessons, that definition that you talked about in point 2, man, they're going to get to play that out, right? And coaching is a great metaphor. Hey, next game, I'm going to call the plays. But in 3 games, I'm going to let you start calling plays. And when we get to the end of the season, guess who's running the offense? You are. And I'm going to be back here correcting, and shifting as we need to. But you're creating whatever space that is for them to be successful. And then the last step, step 5, the most important, is you're going to bless and you're going to affirm them. You're going to look at them and say, hey, you're no longer a burden on the world, but you're a blessing to the world. Now go be the blessing that God's called you to be. Remember, most young people, men and women, most young people have never received that affirmation. They've never received a father's blessing because 41% of them didn't even have a dad, right? I was 40 years old before I heard my dad say he was proud of me. And I've done a lot of stuff that would probably solicit some praise, right? And it didn't matter, man. It didn't matter what some celebrity said. It didn't matter, what degrees I had. It didn't matter how big my ministry got. It didn't matter how big my church was. There was this little boy in me that just wanted to hear his dad say, I'm proud of you. And it took 40 years before that happened, man. And when that happened, it was like a giant weight had come off of me. And I finally had gotten what I needed. That alone right there is transformative. David, what you said something earlier that touched me when you just look at someone and say, do you know you're special? Like, do you know you have a purpose in this world? Most people lack that. They've never heard that. And we possess the power, we possess the keys to unlock them from that cage, man, and show them that their life has meaning. So that 5th step is, Robert did it in a ceremony, how to raise a modern day knight, man. He'd give everybody a sword. I can walk into people's offices and there'll be a sword hanging above their desk, man. I'm like, oh, you're a Robert Lewis guy. And as I think John Eldridge gave everybody a pocket knife, like whatever. I don't care what it is, but there's this ceremony where you're looking at them and you're saying, you got what it takes, man. Now go be the man God's called you to be and do this again. Let's just keep multiplying it.
Man, we could go for another hour, Harp, but we want to
Oh
honor your
dang,
time,
I lost track of time, dude.
right?
I lost
Right.
track
I
of
just
time.
looked.
This is one of my
Hey,
favorite conversations, for real.
yeah.
Come on.
Harp, where do we send people to learn more about Betterman and they can dig in?
Yeah, man. Betterman.com. Again, we make it so simple.
We do.
Betterman.com. And then I write weekly. I do a couple of vlogs weekly, man, at Good Trouble on Substack. So I've got a blog, Good Trouble, calling men. If you're going to be trouble, be good trouble. And so between Good Trouble and Betterman.com, you can keep up with us. It's all free resources, man. We give it away. It's tools for leaders and leaders of men to equip and train other men. So check us out, and any way we can be helpful, let us know.
Well, like expected, this was an amazing conversation. We might have to do part 2 down the road, but appreciate you coming on and honoring us with just your wisdom. David, you have some work to do, friend.
Yeah, dude. No, I got some serious work. Hey, one last point that I want to, we had joked in the beginning about renaming this the Texas Guest Podcast. But what I do want to highlight is I think the fact that we've had so many Texans is it's indicative of, and all have been men. It's indicative of a relationship and the power of community, and the fact that, and really, I look at it as something inspiring that Stu and I are trying to create here in Colorado. And I would love that there's such a powerful network of dudes in Colorado, and not necessarily, it doesn't have to be covenant friendship walking side by side, but it's just a knowledge of other people doing amazing things in your local community and becoming just a force, right? A force. And whether that's through podcasts and influence and local things and coaching and whatever it looks like, a true movement. So it's been incredible to see that extended Texas, up double chuck y'all network type thing that has been beautiful. But I also, man, I just want to encourage you in what you're doing, and the words and the way that God has used you in all these different ways and venues. Man, there's gonna be a line in heaven, a generational line in heaven that you don't even recognize because of your willingness to say yes and to pour into men and get on podcasts with knuckleheads like us and to have these conversations, dude. The reach, man, it like makes me emotional that how beautiful it's going to be. And you will not recognize it. You will not see it. You'll not realize it until you get to heaven. And there's a line of dudes just like, hey man, Harp, thank you. I love you. for eternity, right? It's pretty powerful.
Man, I needed that this week too, bro. Just real talk, man. I needed it. I needed that word this week, and so encouraging. And I started following a guy named Noel. His name's Noel, and he takes pictures of walk-off home runs and he posts them on Facebook. And he always captures the guy rounding third with the team standing at the plate, man, going nuts. And they asked him, they said, "Why do you do that?" And his answer was, he said, "Because I think this is what it looks like when we walk into heaven." Is you're
So good.
rounding third, man, on that walk-off home run, bro. So I say we keep hitting dingers.
Let's go. Harp, this is fun, man. Guys and gals, go check out betterman.com. We'll put that in the show notes. Go check out Good Trouble. Thank you. This is fun. See ya.